Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are connecting in across the world today. This is the February OpenNTF webinar, and we're going to be talking about what's new in Domino security today. Next. Yeah, so our agenda, Daniel Nashed is here to do the presentation. After the presentation, we'll do Q&A, and we'll have a couple of comments on that coming up in a slide in a second. Go ahead, Roberto. Very quickly want to say thank you as OpenNTF, HCL and Prominic very much support the activities of OpenNTF and make us able to support the community and bring things like this to you. So we want to say thank you very much to HCL and Prominic for their support. And of course, as an open source community, the whole notion of open source is that people make contributions on their own. And we encourage you to do so if you've been thinking about making a contribution or aren't sure how to make a contribution. We're very welcoming folks, so we invite you to get in touch with us. Number one would probably be through our Discord server, which you can find a link to on our website at openntf.org. And we invite you to join in, learn what open source is all about, and no contribution is too small. So please come along and join us. Quick note about upcoming events. Of course, the Engage user group is coming up in April, which is coming up very quickly. Theo has made the selections for the presentations that are going to be given at Engage, and this is an in-person user group event in Amsterdam. Check out the website at engage.ug. And for OpenNTF activities that are coming up, we've started a series we called Repair Cafe. For those of you that haven't heard of it, it's basically a live video session, essentially a chat. So you can bring your questions or things that you're curious about or want to talk about. And it's basically a 1 hour in-person video call where no topic is off limits. I mean, obviously focused on Domino or anything in the HCL Digital Solutions portfolio. The next one coming up is next week on Wednesday, and it's actually not dev, Roberto. I think next week is admin.
Right, sorry, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I'll correct the slides.
What we do is a dev gathering once per month and an admin gathering once per month. So yeah, the next one coming up is going to be admin. What do we got next? And our next webinar is going to be on temporary one-time passwords. That'll be March 16th, so a month from now. And we'll have more information up on the webinars page shortly. All right, asking questions. So our normal operation is that we let the presentation happen and we don't interrupt it with questions, but please do use the questions pane in the GoToWebinar UI on your screen. And we'll record all of those and then ask Daniel at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to all the questions at the end of the presentation, we put them together in text format and post them up in a blog post on the website shortly after the presentation. The slides will be available and the YouTube, all of this presentation is going to be available on YouTube. So if you miss anything, it's all going to be available to follow up on. And we ask that the questions are specific to the topic that's being presented here. If you've got off-topic questions, by all means, jump into the Discord. There's lots of different places to ask questions, and lots of us are paying attention, and we'll jump in and answer them when we've got time. And with that, let's get to the presentation.
I'll switch over and give Daniel presenter right so he can start an introduction in case, in the very not likely case that you don't know who is Daniel Nashed. He is definitely one of the gurus in Domino in general and particularly in Domino security. He's a lifetime ambassador, lifetime HCL ambassador, and he's been working on Domino since 30 years, I guess. But I'll hand him over. Oh, yep. I'll hand him over the controls. So Daniel, go on.
Thanks, Roberto, for this nice introduction. Are we on already? Do you see my screen?
Yep, you're good to
Yes,
go.
we said.
Okay, then let's get started. So this topic is about security. I put in 12.0.2, but we are also covering 12.0.1 features. We can't probably cover everything about security, and you just saw that there will be a separate TOTP session soon in the next months. I'm going to present about Domino security, email security, and Roberto asked me to add the news about VSS backup writer support on Windows, which is in fact to some extent also a security topic. I will have some demos and examples, and they're all coming from the DNOC lab environment. The German Nodes user group has an own lab environment, which is full featured with a cluster and with another server, with all the features that you can imagine fully configured. And you will see, especially for DKIM and SPF, you will see live configuration examples that are working in the DNOC environment. So you can afterwards even take your NS lookup tools to check what settings we have. So it's an ongoing environment. So let's get started. First of all, beside the security features in general, there is some news about platform support that might be interesting for you. Red Hat Enterprise 9, SUSE Enterprise 15.3 and 4, the two service packs, and also the upcoming next service pack 5 that is expected mid of this year are supported. And with that, we got support for the release 5 kernel, the major 5 release kernel. And on top of that, we finally got SE Linux in enforced mode supported. So most environments ship already with SE Linux enabled and enforced. And it would be actually reducing our security if for Domino you have to disable it. It was working before, but it wasn't officially supported. So that's very good news here. And actually you should move to the latest releases, especially Red Hat Enterprise 9, because the next Domino release will have new glibc requirements. I hope around Engage, HCL will officially reveal what exactly you will need, but you can expect that for Domino 14 you need a very recent glibc, because the new kernel is not just the new kernel is required, but also the new glibc, because they're changing the compiler, making it the latest and greatest. That means backward compatibility with older releases is not guaranteed. It's not just not supported, it will not work. What we also got in the Domino 12.0.2 release is a new container image. It is now based on the community image that I'm working on with a couple of other volunteers, and it includes my start script for Linux. It's freely available, and you can either use the community project, which has add-on images like the Nomad server, Verse server, the REST API, or you can use what HCL ships on FlexNet already as where we have the Traveler and Domino Leap add-on packages only currently. So if you're really interested in getting the latest and greatest, you should go to the community project. We got some important software updates. I'm not going through all the details here, but we got OpenSSL 3.05, which is the latest and greatest. We got libcurl updated, Apache Tika finally updated. That was missing in the last release. And some of the packages, and I blogged about it, are newer than in most of the Linux distributions. So that's really outstanding, having OpenSSL 3.0 integrated into Domino 12.0.2. But this is not really a new feature. This is like just ground functionality. What I'm now presenting is something that most of you will not notice without me telling you. So when you look into the trusted roots in the Domino directory, those trusted roots were pretty old, and you couldn't see all the details about the certificates. So when you did open them, you would have seen only the name, and to get to the details, you would use cryptic or not documented add formulas, or take the certificate out of the directory and use an external tool. So with 12.0.2, not only the certificates, the root certificates have been replaced or added, they're coming from the PEM file that you might already know from your Domino data directory on the client and server, coming from libcurl. But on top of that, there is a complete new representation. So you see that all the different properties of the root certificates are now listed in the design, in the form. But not only that, they are really fields on the document that you can use to check those details, right? So it's not just in the form and presented from the add formula. It is really the backend that writes all this information. So when you import a new certificate, also the dialog has changed. So that needs the 12.0.2 client, obviously. But you will see all the details in the dialog. So the dialog has been extended, the backend APIs have been extended to understand all the modern information that are in a certificate, like ECDSA, with all the details. Also, you see the subject key identifier, you see the fingerprint in different forms, so it's all there. So that's something that you might not be that interested in, but what is really outstanding is CertMgr and CertStore that has been introduced in 12.0. Just a quick recap. So it's brand new in 12. It replaces keyring files. There are no keyring files anymore that you need. You don't need the cure tool. You don't need OpenSSL. It's all fully integrated. CSRs can be created. We have import and export, and I will show this in a demo. It's pretty simple. It's completely different experience than what you had before, right? So the CertStore is a domain-wide replica. It's a secure place where all your private keys are stored and encrypted. They are only encrypted for the CertMgr and any server that needs access to it by adding it to servers with access. And it has a vault-style encryption layer, which is generating an operations key, and then it's encrypting it for all the servers. So that's really something that is new in 12. What is new in 12.0.2 is support for CertMgr on AX. Before, only the consuming side was on AX. Now AX can also be a CertMgr server for your domain. OS 400 doesn't have support for the CertMgr itself, but it has support for the client part, like the cache and everything, as it was already in 12.0. Creating it is pretty simple. I think we don't need to go through all the details. Important here is that the first server in your domain will be actually that starts the CertMgr task will be the CertMgr server, unless you change that. Changing it will be a separate process. There's a command line command that will re-encrypt all the keys for a different CertMgr server. and it actually doing that with a dry run first that you don't see. So it will try to re-encrypt everything without saving it, and if everything works fine, it will then do the actual re-encryption, and it will tell you, please start CertMgr now on your other server, and you're all set. So any other server will operate in client mode, and the client mode is optional. So everything will also work without starting CertMgr on those other servers. The interesting part here is when you run it once, it will automatically find out what the CertMgr server is and pull the cert store from there. And if you keep it running, it will replicate every 2 minutes without needing a replication document when it can reach the server. But that's really optional. You don't have to do it. It's just a convenience feature. One interesting part to note, and I think I explained it the last time, is we came up with a new name. It's TLS credential or TLS credentials. It is the private key, the leaf certificate, the chain, and the trusted root. And it's all stored in PEM format. And it can be used for all different flows that I'm going to explain. So it's all using open standards, and I would show that to you in the documents, and you will see that it's a completely different way of operation. We have manual certificate operations, and I will show that live to you. We have also the trusted roots in a specific view. The view has been updated in 12.0.2 because now the trusted root store is used for other applications like OIDC and ICAP as well. And I'm showing that in a minute. So here you see the different use cases that you have, but I would show you in a demo how that really works. One small change here is also that instead of 30 seconds for waiting for checking new requests, it's now 2 seconds. And why has that been implemented? Because there is a JConsole that I will explain a little bit later. The JConsole certificates will be also issued by CertMgr, and that's why it has been reduced to 2 seconds. One additional feature that has been around already in 12.0.1 is the micro CA. The micro CA was first introduced for the AppDev pack as a very simple component to create a pair, a root CA and a key and certificate. In 12.0.1, it has been added as a real micro CA, and in 12.0.2, it has been enhanced. So the micro CA is a way for getting a simple certificate from a simple CA with the basic settings, and it's mainly intended for testing or for getting your server set up. So this includes a one-touch flow. That means if you have your first server and you want the first server to get a TLS connection out of the box, there are actually settings in one-touch setup to use the micro CA for issuing certificates. So the JConsole certificates are something that has been also added in 12.0.2. It's only enabled by default when you use one-touch setup for your first or your additional server. For setting up new servers, it will not be issued automatically for existing servers, but there is a simple command to do that. You can use the cert management, not CertMgr, cert management, create micro CA controller certificate, and then you specify your host name. And that will let this server communicate with the CertMgr server, issue a certificate request on CertMgr, wait for the request to be fulfilled, and then it will create a PKCS12 file and import that automatically, and will use that for the JConsole. There is a client side and a server side, and it will be stored in the CertStore database. There's a separate view for that. What has been also added in 12.0.1 are exportable private keys, and I show that in a minute as well. You can create exportable keys because the normal keys are always protected and you can never export them. They're stored encrypted for CertMgr and all the servers that have to have access to it, as I mentioned, and there's no way to export them. And in 12.0.1, an export and import API and dialog has been added. It supports PEM, PKCS12, and tier files for import only. And it always requires a password for exporting. And the password needs to have a certain entropy. So you see on my screen here, I have like password quality 2 weak. So this is really enforced in the UI and also in the backend. So you can't export something that has a weak password. You can change that later on, but Domino doesn't support you to export it unencrypted. And it stores it also encrypted with this password. And I will show that in a minute. Another functionality that has been added in the final step of 12.0.2, it's the certificate URL health check. So CertMgr itself already had a health check functionality for all the certificates, and you would have seen certificate warnings in the UI, and there is also a statistic and everything. But sometimes you export your certificates and keys to another system, and this other system might not update the certificate. Even CertMgr updates the certificate in CertStore automatically. So the team came up with a new idea saying, okay, now that we have functionality to check all those certificates, why don't we check certificates on remote locations? So here you see an example that in the administration section of each TLS credentials document, you can add URLs, and you can even specify different ports. In this case, I'm checking an ICAP server. It works for everything beside SMTP with start TLS, because that's a different protocol. So it works for IMAP, POP3, and everything. So you can monitor all your servers, and you get actually certificate warnings. By default, it will be a statistic on the server, but you can also, and a log message, but you can specify in the global settings an admin user that receives a full list of all the certificates that are expiring. So you get warnings and errors. It looks like this. So you actually see failures and expiration warnings with all the details on it. So it's not just on the console, it's a separate email if you specify an email address. In addition, there are new statistics, health check URL statistics, in addition to the certificate status that you already had in earlier releases. So this was already 12.0, and this has been introduced in 12.0.2. Okay, let's do a quick demo before we switch to something else. So we got many questions about how this really works and all those details. I personally find it really simple and straightforward, but because certificates are always complicated, let's have a look how this really works, and I will explain some backend information that maybe helps you to really understand how it works. In my environment here, I already have a certificate store. I'm not starting from scratch, but I will show you how this all works and how you get started quite easy to issue new certificates. So when you, for example, want to use the micro CA, if you have nothing else and you have no CA in place and you want to use the micro CA, you see here that we have a section called certificate authorities. It's empty in my case. And in 12.0.1, you could already use that, but you had to create the document on your own. With 12.0.2, you just go in and say, add a new TLS credentials. In my case, it's directly putting me to the ECDSA key, right? So I go in and put in any server name. I specify which server should be able to use that certificate. That's important because else the server will not load the TLS credential. And instead of ACME, I choose microCA. That changes the dialog here, and you could select a certificate authority. Because I don't have one, in 12.0.1, it would just not work, right? In 12.0.2, there is new default. When you say submit request, you see it's in pending mode. And now I have a certificate. So this is a full working certificate with a CA. It's a simple CA. You could export the trusted root for that certificate into any browser for testing. So for example, if you want to test Nomad Web always needs a trusted certificate. So you can export that to your browser for testing, and then Nomad Web will work for you in a lab environment. You also see that the CA now is 10 years instead of 1 year. So if you create a new micro CA, it's automatically 10 years for you. If you want a CA with the ECDSA key, you would have to create it on your own. So in that case, you would go in here to certificate authorities. Now you see I have one already. That's the one that has been just created for us. Here is the root certificate, and you just can copy it from here. As I said, it's all PAM based. When you want to create a new one, you say add account, you give it a name. You could go in and say, oh, this should be like ECDSA NIST-P, right? 256. And you then say save and close. You don't change the status because it will set the status for you. It creates a key, and now you have your new CA. And that CA would be available immediately here when I would go in here and say, oh, renew my certificate. And I don't want the standard micro CA, I want the bingo micro CA. I submit the request and boom, that's it. You have your new certificate. If you wonder when this certificate is loaded, it's already loaded on your web server, and you could go and say, tell Cert Manager show certs, and it would show up immediately. That's one way to do it. Second way to do it, which has been introduced in 12.0 already, is Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt either needs HTTP challenges or DNS challenges. The simple approach, and that's what I'm showing here, and there will be a session at Engage showing you how DNS challenges work in very detail. And that will show you all the details, how you build even your own DNS providers. But what we are covering here is creating a certificate with Let's Encrypt using HTTP challenges. HTTP challenges means you're talking to an ACME provider. In this case, it is Let's Encrypt. And usually when you start using it, you start with the staging environment. And this is also the default still in 12.0.2 because it makes sense to test first in a test environment. Else you might run into issues that your account is blocked for a week because Let's Encrypt production has tighter controls than the staging area. So what you would do, you say add TLS credentials, and the default is use Let's Encrypt ACME staging. You put in a name that is resolvable for this server. You put in the servers who should host it. You could also put another one. I know keep.lab.u is one. So that's it. You just need to submit the request. You see it's pending now. And there is a flow going on between the server and the ACME provider, in this case, Let's Encrypt. And it will come back and say, oh, I'm giving you a secret. Now please put that secret on your server. And we are querying it over port 80 to verify that's really you, that you own the domain and everything, right? That's it. You got your new certificate, and it's already in place on your server. It could not be more easy than that, right? So if you want something to be exportable, let's try that again. Let's create a new one. And I mentioned exportable keys. So let's do that again. Put in a server. And instead of letting the server create a key that is not exportable, we are creating an exportable key. I put in a password. And now it created a key. This is a client operation, not a server operation. Your client created the key. I made it exportable. That means in addition to the private key, safely encrypted with the internal operations, you now see a PEM-based encrypted private key in the document, your exportable private key. And with all the operations to export and import, this is going to be used. So when you now go and use the ACME flow or any other flow, it will just create a certificate. And because you have the private key encrypted with your password, you will be able to decrypt it. You will be decrypting actually the PEM-based key. So it's already done because the challenge is still valid. And now you get a new action on top of this, export TLS credentials. Now you can export it in PKCS12 format, also called PEM, P12 or PFX, or you could switch to base64 encoded, which is PEM-based, and it's AES 256 encrypted. So both encryptions are too strong for anything that current Java can do. Everything that we have in Domino that talks Java will not be able to decrypt it. So there's a Node Sinai setting that is published to use the legacy encryption. That's something that you need to set on your Nodes client before exporting. So what you can do now here is you give it a file name. You can select it. You can give it a friendly name. If it's a P12, you have to provide the current password, and then you have to put in a new password, right? You can put in a password. It said it's weak. No, it's medium. No, it's good. And then it finally says no file name is specified. So this is not a client dialog. This is part of the template. You can look into how it's built. And some people already found it. There is a script library encapsulating all the export and importing functionality. Isn't that cool? So pretty simple, based on standards, and the UI is for your flexibility. You could even go in and here is your chain. This is your certificate. This is the full chain. And this is the exportable private key, all in a format that can be used. Let me show you a last flow, because micro CA and Let's Encrypt is maybe not what you need in your environment. So obviously you can import in the same way as I just shown. So you can go in here and you can say import TLS credentials. It comes up with the same dialog, and that dialog has keyring file also. That's a legacy keyring format, right? And that would also work without a password. It will require a password when you want to import it and mark it exportable. So this dialog will find out, oh, you're marking it as exportable, then it's asking you for a password. If you don't, then it's not asking for a password. So let's create a new exportable key. And now, let's say you have your own CA somewhere, corporate CA, then you would choose the manual approach. So you put in your host name like this. You can do a star acme.com or whatever you like. And you can put in other certificate attributes. And what then happens, you submit the request, and the request will go into waiting state. That means now you got a new action on top, copy CSR. So what it does, it creates a CSR here that you could copy manually, but it's even more convenient than that. You have a copy CSR button here. So what you would do here, you could go and then create a new memo. Let's do that on another machine. Oh, Control M is blocked when you have Moba Xterm installed and running. Let me create a new email. So I have my own CA and I'm just sending an email. To lab CA cert. I'm setting up the certificate request. That can be any CA, right, in your environment, a commercial CA, your own corporate CA, whatever, right? In my case, it is my own OpenSSL based CA that I wrote in C. I'm taking the certificate chain, and let me show you something funny. So usually when you create a chain and everything, it needs to be in order and it needs to be exact one. So let's confuse the guy a bit, right? We're putting much more stuff into it than it needs. Guess what happens? Do you think it works? You just paste the certificate. It says certificate pasted, submit, request to finalize. You submit the request, and within seconds, you have the certificate imported. You see that it even has PUNI code in here, and it shows the PUNI code. In my case, the chain is not trusted, and this is not an error. This means that the root certificate was not present in my trust store or in the file that I have. What you do in this case, you go and add the trusted root here in the trusted roots. So you can go in. Let me show that with one that we already have, because we don't have infinite time. I'm shortcutting it here a little bit. You say add trusted root, you say paste certificate, you submit the request, and it will just work, right? Actually, maybe I just do this quickly. I do a new memo. Let's ask the lab CA for its root certificate. So here's the root certificate. Let's just take it, including everything. it doesn't matter. You go in here, add trusted root, you say paste certificate, submit request, and you got a MyCA. It's even a NIST P521 CA. So now if I do the same that I did before, let's grab the certificate, and we're only grabbing the certificate. Now let's get the whole chain in this case, because we have a sub CA here. So it's a certificate and the sub CA. So you just go in and say paste certificate, you submit it again, and you will see the certificate is now green because it auto-completed the chain. So it's not only sorting and filtering chains, it will also auto-complete from the trusted routes that you have in here. Okay, that was the demo. And I think it's really simple. It's all based on standards. If you have questions later on, I'm looking for feedback to help HCL to improve the documentation. If you have questions, go to the Discord channel and maybe we can have a separate topic open here. Okay, let's jump back. A new feature that has been added quite late in Domino 12.0.2 is actually based on support from the community. So OpenID is a very modern new way to do single sign-on. It is similar to SAML, but the flow is more modern and easier to implement and easier to maintain. Not all the providers work yet or have been tested. Here on the screen, you see what has been tested and that what will work. You also see some others that might work or should work, but they have not been tested. If someone is going to test it, and if you run into problems, I would volunteer to help you to get it working, but I don't have those environments. Here are some that will not work because either, like in the Apple case, they have some special requirements that are being worked on for the next release, or others are not fully OIDC, OpenID compliant. So I put them here on screen and they're also documented in some place because HCL doesn't want you to try that because it will not work and it would be just frustrating. So why should someone try to get it working? I tried to get GitHub working and Facebook and Twitter and they all didn't work. And then we looked into the details and we found out what is missing. So how do you configure that? I will not go into all the details. I show you a quick demo for it. And I just walk you through the basics. So you have all the screen prints with all the details that you can follow later on. Some of the functionality is still in Nodes INI settings. That's because that feature has been implemented based on the feedback in the early access program, and it was just too late to get everything into the UI. So one of the configurations that you need to do is the barrier authentication with JWT, right? That needs to be enabled. Then you need a provider that supports OIDC and has a well-known OpenID configuration. You add that to the IDP cat and you put in just the base URL, not including the well-known OpenID configuration. The current implementation should handle that and just ignore it and strip it off, but actually you only put in the base URL. You can put in a trusted root certificate, but you don't have to. I will show that in the next screen, what you can do and what you have to do or what you don't have to do. One very important point that came up in actually the OpenNTF discussion, someone tried to get it working and they only had offloaded TLS on their Nginx server. you really need end-to-end encryption here. So you can use the micro CA, for example, to create a certificate that will then lead to a second encryption between the Nginx server and your Domino server. So you need this kind of configuration, and you can actually go to that URL and you find the different parts in the JSON that are needed. I put in the required configuration parts. If you don't see them in here, don't even try to get it working, because it will just not work. So it needs at least those parameters. Trusted root configuration, by default, it will just use the CA certs in the server's data directory. But if you're a little bit more paranoid, you can have a trusted root configuration, which is new in 12.0.2, where the cert store is holding the trusted roots. And there's a new interesting command that you can use built into CertMgr, and it's actually used for one other use case where we have the ICAP configuration. You start load CertMgr, import roots from URL, you specify the URL, and you give it a category, and it will put that trusted root into your cert store in pending approval state, which is pretty convenient if you don't want to do that manually. In the UI, in the IDPCAT, it's not completely integrated. In the ICAP case, you even have a flow going to cert store directly, but you can open cert store and it will be in pending validation state, like here or here in the view, and you would just mark it as trusted. Obviously, you have to check the subject key identifier, see that it is correct. Everyone is doing that, of course. I guess not, right? But this is what you should do. And you see the usage categories by default will be set to OIDC. In our case, when you do this manually with the import, and in my case, I also added ICAP. And I say this is restricted to only OIDC and ICAP, which is something that you wouldn't do for a global sign root certificate, because you want that also for other flows, right? After that, you need a configuration on the Google side. I will skip the details. You will be able to follow quite easy if you have those links. You put in all the configuration, then it generates a client secret. We have to put the nodes INI settings, as I mentioned. And then after that, what you can do is you can marry your Gmail account with your person document, and that's pretty cool. So I'm using the email claim, and I say, okay, when I'm authenticated, have the delegate authentication, then just authenticate me as this user, right? And then afterwards, I'm this user on the server. Do you believe that? Let's have a very quick look into that. Let me open a browser. It's directly redirecting because I'm already Google authenticated. If I go to a private window, you would see here that it's redirecting to Google, and it's asking me for my credentials. And it supports all the functionality that you have for Google to authenticate. I find this pretty cool, and it really is a modern way for authentication. If you ask me, I would not go to use SAML anymore if you don't have to in some other environments. So if your environment supports OIDC, OpenID, go with that in future. Okay. I don't see any questions yet. So next topic is SPF, a long-awaited feature. It has been implemented in 12.0.2. I put the RC and all the details. So pretty much you should know SPF already. So if you're responsible for a mail environment and you don't have a SPF configuration, go and do that today, because it's even more important to have outgoing SPF configuration than incoming, right? So what has been added in 12.0.2 is incoming SPF validation, but you should already have your DNS set up that you define exactly who can send, which servers are allowed to send emails. So there's really a framework with all the details, and there are complex rules that you can set up. In my example here, I put dnuc.de as a very simple example. It says, allow this IP, include everything from this provider, from that provider, and also from factor Y, because some servers are hosted at factor Y, and then decline everyone else, right? And on top of that, you add your own MX records. So you always will find MX and minus all, and everything between is like additional. So I put together like some information that you can follow, and I would mainly focus on the inbound part. The inbound part is just configured on the server side in the configuration document. You can log and tag message or here, and it will add information into the incoming email, the received SPF field. And then you can use that to validate the message, drop the message, or whatever. That's one component. The next component is DKIM. We already got DKIM in 12.0.1, but this part is incoming DKIM. So it was outgoing DKIM for signing messages. I put all the details here, how I configured it for DNUC, with all the settings and all the ways to query the existing records, and you can look at them. What you basically do, you have a TXT record, and you have a key, and it's a domain verification. The emails are signed on the mail router. It's a generic key for the whole domain. You can have more than one key. You can sign it, for example, with an ED key and also with a RSA key. Domino supports both for outgoing and incoming. And finally, it ends up adding a signature to your message. This is an actual DKIM signature, how it shows up in a message. In this case, an outgoing message. And here is how you enable it for outbound. But we are mostly interested in inbound here because outbound was already 12.0.1. So for inbound, you just enable it here. That's directly next to the SPF checking, right? And what happens? You're getting a DKIM signature field in inbound messages, and then you get a combined status. It's the authentication result status. It has been added after the last code drop, so even if you looked into the beta program, you wouldn't have seen that. So it gives you details about SPF and DKIM, and it's a RFC standard, and you can use that to query information. And this is also used to tag messages as junk and deliver it into junk folder, or you can use external tools. Like I'm using my CertMgr to, without any code change, it's just additional rules that you add where those fields are leveraged. Okay, that's a quick round about DKIM and SPF. If you have questions later on, we can look into that, but I'm not going to show it. The next part is CScan antivirus. Actually, some of this could be a separate session even, right? So there's so much content, so we have to focus quickly on how it works and how you configure it, and you have more details on the slides. Especially for CScan, let me start with like the basics. So the idea was that we want antivirus on Domino, and there's a protocol that is used by antivirus vendors called ICAP. It is mainly intended for proxy security, so it's sending the whole proxy traffic to an ICAP server, and it's checked and filtered on the ICAP server for viruses, for unwanted content in general, and then we're using it here for Domino in a way that we say, okay, there's this ICAP server somewhere on your network or on the cloud. Email comes in, it comes into the mail router, and it is sent to the ICAP server. If everything is okay, then it just works. When a virus is detected, Domino will know which document has a virus. It will disinfect the message or discard the whole message and then delivers the message, or sends an email to the recipient, not to the sender, only to the recipient, that the message had a virus, right? So that's a very simple principle, and there are multiple vendors out there. Here's the reference to the RFC. And there's a new server task, mail scan server task, which is integrated into the mail router flow, which is a separate task, but it's working hand in hand with the mail router. So it's not completely separate. It's directly looking into the message queues. There are a couple of providers that have been tested by HCL. So CertMgr and McAfee have been tested. If you have other solutions, I would like to hear from you. And HCL also wants to hear from you. If you need assistance, I would volunteer to help you to get it working. It's just too much effort to get hands on all those installations. So HCL works with CertMgr and McAfee mainly. We have been using the CICAP project, and Ulrich Krause put together a configuration for that, and we have been testing with that. And HCL has a very simple test server, the ICAP mock server, which I will demo really quickly for you. It is a local server that detects like dummy viruses and the ICA virus just for you to test this new functionality. It has been removed after early access code drop 4, so it's not part of the release, but if you need it, we will find a way to get that to you. So I have it, and I think I'm allowed to redistribute it if needed. So it's not a full package. It is just something to simulate, but it really speaks ICAP. So you're really talking to an ICAP server. So there are multiple databases involved, a configuration database, a log database, a quarantine database, and the configuration flow is the first server creates a domain-wide configuration database, and then every server will have a configuration afterwards. So you create a configuration, in this case here CertMgr. You specify configuration settings like scan options, tag options, log options. Then you specify settings. So what is the server name? What is the TLS port? How is the ICAP service name called? And some other details here, right? If you have specific requirements for a virus, a detection formula to show the virus name based on the header. And then you need a trusted root. And the trusted root is taken from CertStore. And if you don't have one, it has this dialog here, import trusted root via CScan connection. And now you see a pattern. This is invoking a remote server console command that's going to this server with this port, and it will grab the certificate for you. Isn't that cool? It's fully integrated. And then in the next step, you have an open certificate store button here. And then in the next step, your insert store, you see, oh, this certificate has the ICAP category. It has this little icon here, says, oh, pending validation. And then it has already the ICAP status here, the usage category and restricted category. And then you just mark it for trusted and you're good. No manual pasting, but in some cases you might need that still. And it still works in the same way as I have shown you earlier in the session. So the result is always a trusted root certificate. So there are certificates was a SAN and those kind of details. And once you have done that, you just go to the server document that is created either manually or on startup of the server task, and you give it a configuration name. And the configuration name can be used by multiple servers. So if you have an ICAP server in one location, you can have a configuration profile that you assign to all the servers in this location, and you're good. That's it. So because this is so important, and because it will stop all your mail routing for messages that have attachments, HCL came up with something that is checking the health of this connection. So in the first setup, it will go and try to connect to the server. And if everything is good, it will say, oh, it's green, it's all good. If a certificate is about to expire, it will be yellow. If it doesn't work, it's red. If it's disabled, then it has an X. If there's a configuration change that you need to do to validate the certificate, you get an exclamation mark. And I think I show you the log database and the log attachments live because that's much more interesting, and that will be the last demo because of time restrictions, unless you have questions later on and I can demo something for you quickly. There's one detail that I want to explain really briefly. If you have multiple servers, the routing between servers would then require a new scan, right? So, but if both servers have the same virus scanner and the message has been scanned within a short period of time and there is no new antivirus pattern, why should we scan the message again, right? So the team came up with a new idea. We put in a token, and the token has details about the scanner, the server, the antivirus pattern, and it's all based on a modern standard. It's as you can see here, it looks like a JWT. It is a JWT, and it's using a modern ED key. And when you take that field and you put it into the parser on the JWT website, you actually see the content of this token. And you see the issuer, when it was created, on which servers, which scanner version, which scan database, which unique ID of the scan document, the configuration name, and the verification hash with all the details. And that's how it looks like. So let me give you a very quick demo. I'm not configuring it from scratch. I have the mock server set up in my environment. I have already a log database, which will be created automatically. I have a quarantine database, which will be created automatically from template. In my case, I have the Linux lab server here, and it has the configuration for a mock server. It is enabled, and the service is validated. Validating really means the server task talks to the ICAP server, validates not just the connection, it validates that ICAP works, and it also sends a test virus, the ICAR test virus, to the server to see if the server is really up and running and really has a pattern to scan for antivirus. So you see it's enabled. In my case, it's enabled and has verbose settings. And if you want to, you can go in here and disable it. It will prompt you because it says, do you really want to disable antivirus, right? If you say no, it will not do anything. You could open the certificate store from here, and you can open the configuration. So it directly jumps to the right configuration, and you see the mail scan options with all the details. As I mentioned, you have the different options, like in my case, clean and deliver. You could also say silent, discard the message with notification, quarantine original message, and then you have 40 days of quarantine. If someone wants to know why it's 40 days, go and look up the word quarantine on Wikipedia. That's just a fun fact here. So you have all the details of how that message is tagged. You can put in an antivirus view icon that is put to the message. And that's the basic configuration. That's what the user will see. That's what's happening on the server. But here is also the scan configuration. And the scan configuration has the ICAP protocol, the maximum size of a message to be scanned. Larger messages, if you put that to 100 megabytes, larger attachments will not be scanned. In my case, I'm using the loopback and I'm not using TLS. There's a special switch for that. And you see that I don't need certificates here, but you could select certificates. And they are actually coming from the certificate store, and you can directly jump into it here. So you see it's all end-to-end done, right? And here is this, for example, has a pending validation flag. You can mark it as trusted. And now the flag is going away. And when you go back to your document and reopen that document, because it's cached, you would actually see that it found two, right? We didn't select one explicitly, which will only use this guy. If you remove this here, it will use everything that is in the ICAP category. And you will see this kind of configuration in future releases in other places. So this is really the Cert Store working in combination with the ICAP server. And you have the same also for OIDC, and you will see that in future for other applications. So the Cert Store is going to be more important in the next releases, and step after step, it's moving away from trusted routes in other places. It's going to be all centralized, hopefully soon. Okay, let's have a quick look what happens here. Let's send an email. We have the DNOG admin. I put in an ICAP virus in here. Let's forward that to myself. So you see this mail really has, oh, what does it do on view? So it found an virus. You see that here, virus security. So when I go in here, you see a new email. And it says CScan virus found, ICAR test virus. That was the message. And when you open it, you will see attachment has been replaced due to virus. And that's a text that was configurable in your configuration. And in my, you can go to the log database and the quarantine database, but you don't have to. You can jump into the configuration database and you see this is your server. And in here, you even have a button, say open mail scan log. So this is already also acting as your central place as a starting point for logging. So then you open the log database and you see, oh, there is a new document, new attachment that has been found to have a virus, right? When you open that document, that you see that that we got all the details in here, including the node ID, the unique ID, the replica ID, the hash of the attachment. You can look into the details from the ICAP server. So this is all the details coming back from the ICAP server. So you see the mock server is a real ICAP server speaking real ICAP. It even puts the char1 of the attachment that it got into it. Why is that the case? Because this is also used for automation testing. And you can actually see when you put in an attachment that what is coming back really found the right attachment. So it's like a check if the protocol works in the right way. And you see it detected the ICA virus. So it's even giving back that it was the ICA virus. And you see the ICAP status with all the details. Why do we have the char1 of the attachment? Because you can take that and you can go to virus total for lookup. So you don't need to send any data to virus total in many cases, because most of the cases the virus is already known. And of course, this is a test virus, so it is known by all the virus scanners already, right? That's also pretty useful. And on top of that, you can also go and see here you have the full message. There's a message log. If you have multiple attachments, it will show all the attachments that had a virus. And from here, you can jump back. And for some reason, the quarantine is not shown, but you also have the document in the quarantine. It prompts you that it might be harmful. It can have a virus. And you see another warning here, but this is the real attachment, and you could go from here back to the message log. And from here, you can jump back to the individual attachments. So it's all hooked up with each other. And as you know, replica ID, unique IDs are used in nodes in all the places, and this is taking benefit of that. That was a quick demo here. I think we have 15 minutes left, right? Someone is already
15 minutes, Daniel, yes.
Opening the mic. Give me like a couple of minutes to finish the slides. We have more content, obviously. We have one last topic, and actually we are almost good in time, so I will not go into all the details. Roberto asked me to add backup because the backup that is in 12.0.2 is a pretty cool feature, the new VSS writer support. And before telling you about the backup, I'm telling you why I put backup on those slides. Security is also about continuity of your service and about disaster recovery, and it has to be part of your security concept. And not only that, you also have to have a backup strategy that includes protection against ransomware attacks. So especially when you use the simple backup that HCL introduced with Domino 12.0, you might use a very simple file backup approach and have a backend storage that is a file system. In that case, your file system will be writable, right? So it could mean that if your server is infected, and we're pretty sure if you run a Domino server on Linux, you're probably not being part of a ransomware attack, but it could happen, right? So, so what you have to do is you have to find an approach to make the backup data not accessible from your server all the time. And it, of course, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it really needs to be integrated into your backup strategy and in the way you run the backup operation. What I'm saying here is not just true for the Domino backup, it's for any backup scenario. So let me give you some very basic ideas what to do. So mount, unmount gives you some security, but this is not really a lot of extra security. This is like a bit, if you wish, you could say like security by obscurity, right? But someone will still find out and will see, oh, the ransomware attack will not stop during your backup, right? So one part would be if your backend is ZFS, and I have a typo here, CFP, it's CFS. ZFS is a very, very, very interesting backup media because it supports encryption, it supports compression, and it supports deduplication. And once you backed up to a ZFS, the ZFS storage could take a snapshot, and then you're good, right? Whatever happens, ZFS will be always able to restore to that last snapshot. Right? A different approach would be use a remote backup repository like Borg Backup, which includes communication with an SSH key. And that means you are in full control of storing the data. It's not just a normal file system. And then you have, for example, other solutions like Restic Backup on Windows, which is actually a really cool tool that supports VSS snapshot, if Domino would support VSS snapshots. And there are commercial solutions like Veeam Backup and Replication that also protect your backups and have very good ransomware protection. And I have to say, Veeam Backup also has a completely free of charge community edition with 10 different kind of workloads that you can do, 10 different backup jobs actually. So if you want to look into Veeam, there's a full Veeam integration from HCL, and it's free of charge for a small environment. I'm using that in production, and I also back up my notebook with Veeam, and it's pretty cool. And it's free for a small environment. So VSS writer. So wouldn't it be cool to have Domino just be listed as a VSS writer? So it had been an idea that was around for a while. It got quite a lot of votes, but it wasn't that easy to implement. So what would VSS support mean? It would mean the Domino server needs to register itself as a VSS writer using the Microsoft VSS API. A backup application would start and would issue a command to generate a snapshot. So it will talk to a VSS backend API. VSS then sends an info to all the VSS writers and say, hey, someone is doing a backup. Are you okay with that? Are you interested in taking your database into snapshot mode? And then that application will respond and say, yeah, if you do a snapshot, then let me know. I will bring everything into backup mode. So the snapshot is taken. Then afterwards, VSS says, yeah, we are done. No application, continue to work. And then Domino, in our case, would need to get the delta data, like every backup application that uses the backup API needs to do, and would put it somewhere. Putting it somewhere is a problem and a challenge, and the databases would need always to be restored with the backup API. But there is something really, really cool that's called auto-recoverable snapshots. And I just didn't want only VSS support. I saw that and I thought, oh, auto-recoverable snapshot, that would be cool. So with an auto-recoverable snapshot, the snapshot itself is not read-only. So there is a phase during that whole operation where you can actually get data merged into the snapshot. That would mean all the delta data and all the open databases could be closed if Domino would support VSS and would support auto recovery. Guess what? Domino 12.0.2 supports the full thing, including everything. And I'm not going through the full flow here. I put that together for you to understand in more detail, but we're not going to do that here. I'm just explaining you quickly the different components. There's a new server task only for Windows, of course, because this is only available on Windows, called Backup VSS. It is started once, and it's registering Domino as a VSS writer. And then when an external application will back up a disk on which Domino has its data, Domino will respond to the query event that it's interested, and then the whole flow goes on. And it will actually do everything for you. You don't need to do anything. There's no integration needed for the backup part, only for the restore part. So what I did for the GitHub repository, I wrote a new simplified configuration with all the details just for Windows and just for the Veeam integration for 12.0.2. So it's a revised document with only the components that you need. So there are some limits. Of course, there are some limits, like it has to be all the same volume and those kind of details. I don't think we need to go through details. So NSF links, for example, pointing to a different disk would be a problem. That wouldn't be supported. What would happen in that case? Domino would just give you the info that those databases cannot be backed up because they are not part of the snapshotted volume, right? So it will not break. It will just inform you that it's not on the same disk. So if you have links outside the data directory and it's the same disk, it will still work. So someone took the time to do it really as you expected, and it's all working well. I'm using that in production for a while. So that's it, Roberto. I made it in time, and it was 80 slides,
Great.
including demos.
Yeah, wonderful. Very good presentation, because a lot of details and food for thought. If someone has not implemented all this new stuff, should really consider doing it now. We have a few questions. The first one from Gregor says that he tried to create the certificate in the same way that you did, but the request stayed in submitted mode. I guess it's pretty hard to answer to that.
I was
No,
gonna,
there is probably either. So is this 12.0.1 or 12.0.2?
12.0.2.
12.0.2 clean installed server.
So in 12.0.2, you can't get that wrong. You have to try hard to get it wrong.
My suggestion to Gregor would be to join our Discord channel, put the question there, and
maybe we do it in a different way. I come to the Repair Cafe and we do a session.
Probably.
Because that will have
question. Yep. So Gregor joined the Repair Cafe on the 22nd. Another question, is it possible to import existing wildcard certificate to support TLS connections?
Of course. Why should that be a different thing? So you can go and import it in any way. So what you have here at TLS credentials, you have an import TLS credentials button, and you have the different key parts here, right? You can take a PKCS12, you can take a PEM, You can import the alt-tier file. You just put in the password if it has a password, and only when it needs to be exportable, you need to supply a new password. And it doesn't care if it's a wildcard certificate. It will detect it automatically.
Okay, thanks.
So there's one point here that I want to explain. And there's a little glitch in this UI. Because this is the client-side operation, this is the first client-side operation. All the other operations are server-side. You have to specify the server for which you encrypt before you invoke this UI. So specify the server, then you say import TLS credentials. Actually, saying that isn't sufficient. You have to press the action button, and then you import it. And that's a client-side operation, and it will encrypt for this guy. If you put it in later on in the same session, then it will not detect that it changed. So I proposed a change, how to change the logic in the form. It's a small glitch in the form, right? When you miss that, you can continue and save it, and then later on go in again and specify another server or two, and you save the document, and it will say server list changed, issuing private key re-encryption for new server list, right? That's the only part that you need to be aware of.
Okay. The next question is from Chef Bosman. Is it possible to use these certificates with an Nginx reverse proxy in front of Domino? If so,
yeah.
How to update certificates that are used by Nginx automatically?
Yeah, this is not a new question. So I have blogged about this, and I have ready-to-go scripts. So CertMgr will provide certificates when you ask for the right name, right? So certificates are public. The key is the private part. If you have an exportable key and you use the flow that I demonstrated, where you create an exportable key, or you have an existing key and you import it in Domino, you can reuse that key. So anyway, if you keep the key, the only difference is the certificate, right? So you can issue a very simple OpenSSL command to connect to your server, to your CertMgr server. And if the CertMgr server is listed in access in this field here, in the servers with access, it will hand you over the certificate.
This could also be a great topic for the Repair Cafe. Since we have 2 minutes.
No, actually, it's going to be part of the workshop that we're going to do.
Okay. There is the last question. It is, what kind of server is the ICAP server, Domino or another system, and it's located internally or externally?
This has nothing to do with Domino. We are using the ICAP server task as a test environment. So that's a server task for testing. ICAP server is usually an appliance that you have on site in your environment. You could have it also in the cloud. But usually this is in your environment, right? Oh, CertMgr show certs. So this has been added in 12.0.1. You see all the certificates that you have. So you see everything that the service hosted, right? In 12.0, this was a challenge because you didn't know actually what it had in place. So now you see all the details. Tell CertMgr show certs. You see the subject key identifier abbreviated. You can take that here to search in the documents. You see the key info, the expiration. If it has a keyring file tag, you see the tag, and you see all the names. And if it would
Thanks,
be
Daniel.
more, it would be say +5 or something, right?
There is a question that came right now, but we have to close. It says if we can show quickly the procedure for outbound DKIM configuration. No, the answer, I'm going to answer that, and the answer is no, because we have to close the webinar now.
No, it's all,
again,
Roberto, it's all in the slide deck, right? It's all there
okay.
step by step.
Eventually, if the asker is gonna join us at the Repair Cafe, we can take this topic again. With that, I thank very much you, Daniel, for an excellent presentation. Lots of interesting stuff. Thanks to all who joined us today. Again, as Graham said, the recording will be available shortly on our website together with the slide deck from Daniel. If you have any other question, again, join our Discord server. Daniel is there, so he can eventually ask your question, or also some other people if needed. So thanks a lot, and that's it. I'll finish the meeting.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, Roberto and team, for having me.
Thanks, Daniel.
And I hope you guys liked it, because I try to give you more background information than just giving you the slides and the topic. And I hope the demo helped you to understand it a little bit more in detail. So if you have questions, really join the OpenNTF channel on Discord, and we can open topics, right? And threads, please use threads. Okay. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for inviting me, right?